Hi, this is Gil Robles. Again, I apologize. It's not Friday, it's Monday morning, and I am posting now. Well, at least I'm recording now. Hopefully, I'll have this posted by this morning. But again, I'm still having problems with the software I'm using. It's really the microphone. I don't know if it really was obvious in my last video, but although the microphone seems fine when I record it, when I go to render everything in Premiere Pro, I get this breaking up or crackling noises to the microphone. So I don't know. I'm still new to the software, so I'm trying a different mic. Maybe it's the mic and not the software. But here I am, and what I'm going to do today again is still something a little bit different. Someone had asked about the blend modes. I'm just going to uh, go over the layer blend modes that I use, and it's really one. And then there's the property that I use as far as making my paintings are concerned is I use the opacity to the layers a lot, and I change them in order to blend things. Now I use it a lot less these days because the brushes in Sketchbook allow me to, let me see if I can do this, allow me to blend the colors a lot more easier than before. So if I were to do this, or if I were to use a different brush, make it larger. This brush allows me to blend the color of more than I did before. And this, I have more options now than I did before. These, let me make bigger brushes here. These brushes allow me to do more than I could have before. So, but one of the things I do use, um, here you got an the layer editor right here, and I have some things to show you in a minute. And one of the things I do use it for is, like, supposing I want to introduce or bring it just a little bit more cooler, or introduce a different, I'll do that. And so the blue will go into it. Let me pick a color that would make this more obvious. Let's see. Now, if I do a red and introduce a blue like this, you get more of a purple. So, if I wanted to change the color that way, I would use the opacity that way. Just to and also, what I would use it for, it's kind of like tracing paper. Like, if I have something that I want to correct underneath, and I just want to change that area, or I have to redraw a certain area, I'll redraw that area over another layer, and I'll decrease the opacity on the layer underneath. That way I can make my corrections, and then once having done that, I can just erase what's underneath and replace it, and or erase what's underneath with either with paint really, and replace it with the layer on top, and then bring the opacity back up to all the layers. So that's the way I would use it then for my painting. Then again there is uh, the multiply, which is this layer right here. I choose multiply out of all of these, and what I would do was I'd open a layer behind that and simply, because when you do the multiply, it ignores all the white areas. It's kind of like a punch out. It punches out all the white areas and leaves everything that's darker. So you can color this. This especially comes in handy for that kind of comic book style coloring and such. So I've done that. Let me. This is the illustration I did in 2015 using that, where basically I went in with the um I scanned in an ink drawing and I came back in and I bring it into Sketchbook Pro. Back then it was Sketchbook Pro, and I colored it that way using the multiply layer and whatever else. And then what you would do is once you say you had this part, everything over here all colored in, and you went ahead and you colored in the background. Well, let me do this. Mistake here. Because I would do the background on a different layer, right? So you colored in the background on a different layer underneath. And let's supposing I had all of this colored. And so you can color it anything you want and you make it a flat image and then you lock it. So what happens when you lock it, the only thing that you can change, you can't color apart from what's you colored already. You can only color on top of that. So the only thing that you can change is the color that you've painted already. So I can only color on top of that. I can't color anywhere else. You see, so that when you isolate, when you isolate, okay, let me open this. When you isolate certain areas, like with the paint, what happens is that you can change the color, you can mix the color, you can blend the color, you can do a number of things without worrying about it affecting um, anything over here if it was locked. See, it's not locked, so I can color in there. Now that it's locked, I can't color in there. I'm trying to, it won't accept it. I can go here and color in there, but I can't do it while this is locked. And so, that's how I arrived at this, where I was basically able to do all these different colors and blends and stuff like that when I isolated these areas, without worrying about it going into the other ones. I chose a different layer for the sky, a different layer for the dinosaur, a different layer for the pterodactyls, a different layer for the mountains, and a different layer for the trees. And of course, a different layer for the ink drawing. And when I wanted to add like some of these feathers over here on the far right, some of these whites over here, what I did was that, or some of these lighter strokes over here, what I did was I added a layer over the entire drawing, over the black and white drawing, where I added a normal layer where I could go ahead and do that, put these strokes over it. Um, Otherwise the black lines would show underneath it. So anyway, that explains the multiply layer, and let me go ahead and explain some things about when I use uh, when I'm painting. All right. Okay, I'm switching to something I had recorded previously. This is an illustration that I'm working on. Now, if you notice the layer editor, you can see that the layer that I'm working on, which is the second layer from the top, I've changed the transparency. I lowered the transparency just a little bit. So what I have here is I'm working with a little less transparency, but just enough for me to affect the changes that I need to affect. Now I'm just correcting the drawing at this point, but at some point I'm going to introduce things that will change the color and go further in correcting the drawing and so forth. I don't want to completely obliterate what's underneath it. That's why I have it at this level of transparency, so that I kind of sneak up on my changes. And also what it helps me to do is it helps me to blend a little bit. But like I said, I don't need the blending as much because of the options that I have with the brushes now, that I can use the brushes to blend a lot better than I did in Sketchbook Pro. Um, I try to do it in a way that's comfortable for me. I'm sure there's a lot of different ways of blending things that people choose that are way different. Over here, I'm introducing a cooler color over there on the left side of the man's face, and that helps me to lowering the transparency helps me to introduce that color without being without completely going to cool. It still picks up some of the warmth of the color underneath, so it looks more natural that way, and it doesn't jump. And one of the things that is a problem with digital is the digital color is so bright and so intense that it gets easy to lose to everything to be in a different value, or a different key, and it's less harmony in terms of the colors. And you want, if you want something that looks natural, and if you want something that looks closer to um, traditional, or to traditional paint, then you don't want things to jump all over the place. You want a value structure that makes sense, and you want a value structure that looks natural. So if everything is high key, that means everything is yelling at you at once. Uh, I remember my art instructor once told me that, you know what, you don't want to go to a play, or you don't want to go to a movie where you see all the actors are yelling at each other at once, because you can't make sense of the story or the plot or whatever. Same thing with painting. You don't want to look at a painting where all the colors are yelling at you at once, because you can't make sense of it. And this is especially important for illustration, because you want to communicate your story, and you want to communicate it in a way that makes sense. And so that's why it's important to have a value structure. It's important for you to be able to communicate, and you to be able to um, harmonize your painting so that people could read it right. So anyway, that's what I'm doing. That's what I do with the layers, is that I keep switching from the different transparencies. The layer I'm currently working on, you can see that the transparency is up. There's no, it's up all the way, so it's 100%. Now I can lower the transparency when I want to make further changes, but this is what I do, and I don't need a lot of different layers. I put all the background characters for this illustration in the same layer, and I put the main character in a different layer because not much is going to change in the background. I've already worked that out in my preliminaries, and when I showed the art director, I showed them what the illustration was going to look like, and I can shift things around, but the main thing is the of course the main thing is the main character. So I put that character on a different layer, and I put all the rest of the figures in the background, and it helps me to not have too many layers in the project because it makes the file bigger, and I want to keep the file size down. And when I do, because I send my illustration by email. So I want to make sure they have a good size. Anyway, this is just the beginning of this illustration, and this is just a demonstration of how I use the transparency in the layer to complete an illustration, the layers to make changes. This is the final illustration, at least this is where it stands right now. I might go back and make some changes before I go ahead and send it to the art director. Anyway, I just wanted to use this time to explain the layers because someone had asked, and it's a quick video to make to show you how it is that I use the layers. There's a lot of different uh, blend modes in the layer editor right now, and there's some different ones, some newer ones in Sketchbook that were not in Sketchbook Pro. So it takes some exploring to figure them out. But this is what I use. This is what I'm used to using. So as far as my illustrations and the way I paint is concerned, this doesn't change. Anyway, that's my illustration. This is my video. I hope this answers the question. I hope this was helpful. If you have any other questions regarding how I use the layers, how I use the tools, um, whatever, leave it in the comments below, and I'll definitely get to it. Thank you so much. Bye bye.